Okay, I will call the Wednesday Valentine's edition 2024 of the Monona Park and Rec Board. You've noted who's not here. We've got the minutes from the January 10th meeting. Someone like to move approval? Who? Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any changes? All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Minutes are approved. Next item is appearances. And Kathy, do you want to speak? Right.
Mhm.
Okay. I think what we'll do is have Andy Pitzlar is here to do the San Damiano presentation. We'll do that and then we'll take you after that.
That's great.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then you could add comments that you
Thank
wanted
you.
to share.
Thank
afterwards, yeah. She wanted to make some comments about the next. Will it work if I go all the way back there?
Sure.
We'll give it a whirl. All right. So thanks for taking the time. I'll just preface that there's about 28 slides in here. Hopefully everyone had a chance to at least review the draft proposal, about 158 pages there. So I'm going to go through this relatively quickly because I know you guys have a lot to other things to discuss, but we wanted to be sure to present this and get feedback from the Parks and Rec. And then actually right after this, my counterpart will be providing the same presentation to the Landmarks Commission too. So we wanted to get a lot of different feedback, but wanted to make sure you guys are aware of this. And a lot of you have already been at a lot of the meetings that we were at, some of them on the steering committee. So again, I want this to be a little bit more of a conversation than necessarily a formal presentation, but we'll try to touch on some of the highlights that we had. So this PowerPoint here is actually what we utilized for our last public information meeting. And you can kind of see what we went over there, but opening remarks and different things like that. So quick background, I'm not gonna belabor this, but one thing as being a Friends representative that I'm proud of is that this master planning and community engagement process was not funded by the city, but solely by donors. And so the Friends were able to raise the $143,000 in order to accomplish that and hire MSA. It's been a great partnership between the city from, the start to where we are today. And we look forward to kind of seeing where it will go in the future. And I'll touch on that as well. But you can kind of see from when the city purchased it to where we are today. Just want to, certainly provide a note of thanks like the mayor did at our information meeting to a number of people, including Jake for staffing it at some level, but also for, just general parks participation in this. Other department heads, Neil now staffing it, and then all of these steering committee members. These are the current members, but Kelly, for example, was on it too. So, thank you for your service during that time. And we also had Lauren Gage, who was our school board member before Jesse stepped on as the school district's representative. So we tried to get a large swath of representation on the steering committee. So just providing a little bit of overview of the process of how we got to what we have today. MSA was hired and they did a large site analysis. So before even having public information meetings, they looked at the trees, they looked at the topography, they looked at the wind, they looked at, the lighting, a number of different things like that. And so that's what these maps really represent. And they were really trying to pull together a lot of information, whether it was from the house, the structural analysis of the house, again, to the landscape, and provided a lot more detail in the report. But that also helped us think about what we're doing and where we're doing it on the property. I'm not even going to touch this timeline because it's a lot of busyness for a lot of detail, but what I want to do is just kind of skip to this next one because I think what that previous timeline really represented was all of these touch points. So we had over 3 community surveys. We had focus groups of about a half dozen or more groups. We had 3 public information meetings. We had stakeholder interviews with a variety of folks, whether it was inside the city or outside. And then each month we had a public, give or take, I think there was maybe 1 month that we didn't have a meeting and had to reschedule, but we had a public committee meeting for the steering committee. So what I really want to highlight here is that we had over 6,000 unique individuals that provided feedback. This process, as the timeline noted earlier, started in 2022. So it's almost been, by the end of it, it'll almost be a 2-year process of really trying to hear what the public has to say about the property and really critically think about what will go into the final master plan. And I'm pretty proud of what we were able to do. And this includes, having tours of the house and having tours of the property, different things led by, Jake or others, and then by friends of groups and different people like that. So it was an amazing 2 years so far. So what we did after the initial public information meeting, MSA came up actually with 3 different concepts: historic reuse. And again, I won't, unless there's additional questions, I won't go into great detail in this. Concept B is very minimalist. So you see that how there's no facility there aside from a little restroom over here. And then more of a modern park. So getting rid of the existing house and then thinking about what we can do with the space with a new facility. So then what we did as a steering committee after, again, more feedback of the initial public information session, we came up with a committee vision. So we wanted something that was our guide rail for the decisions that we make. And for the sake of repeating it, because you can all read it, I do want to just say it out loud, is to create a sustainable and serene natural lakeshore destination offering recreational, cultural, and education opportunities for people of all ages and abilities. And what that did was it helped us formulate what ended up being 5 goals for the San Damiano property. And again, I'm not going to touch on them all. Oh, is there somebody here? Oh, sorry. Thanks for pointing. Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. But one thing I'll mention here is increased public access to the property and to Lake Monona, both from land and water. Also, the last goal of sustain and support property improvements and ongoing operating costs by leveraging philanthropic and revenue generating opportunities. As you on this board in particular are well aware, we have a lot of assets and facilities and a variety of parks in Monona, and what we really are looking to do is to have this really, to be simple, off the tax rolls. So that any improvements are all fundraised, the maintenance is all paid for. Now, that's not saying that city staff might not do it, but it would be paid for time and otherwise, time and materials by private donors. And I think that's important to note for a number of reasons, and I'll just re-emphasize that. So then after all of that, and after 2 public information meetings, there was really consensus around a number of items. So the next 2 slides are really what ended up being the final master concept plans. I say 2, and you'll realize why there's 2. This first, so some of the consensus items are the parking lot, for example. You'll notice both of them are towards Monona Drive. That was overwhelmingly supported to get that closer, get all that busy traffic closer to Monona Drive. Multi-use paths, so not all paved paths, but also some permeable paths. Paths that are accessible to all abilities, paths that get you from the parking lot to the whatever facility, or get you to the lake. Because right now, an individual can't necessarily, if they're on a wheelchair, get around the house and to the lake. A pier of some sort. So again, thinking about our goal of getting people from Lake Monona and from land to enjoy the property, and how best can we do that? What I'll say is kind of a boat landing or a boat beach, we'll say, where kayaks, canoes, and different kind of non-motorized vehicles can utilize. And then something else I'll note is kind of nodes. These nodes could be outdoor classrooms, they could be natural play areas. We're not thinking, the typical swing set or kind of typical park amenities that you see, but like a natural play area. And so there are, in one of our first drafts, there was 7 or maybe even more than 10 nodes, and we whittled that down to 5 nodes, and we just want points of interest for the park. Now, I said there's two drafts, so those are kind of ones that you'll see similar on both plans. I say two drafts because, and I'll touch a little bit more on this, we did not make a decision about keeping the facility, keeping the house or building a new facility. So these two plans have, this is one with the current house. And then, yeah, change it. And then this one is with a new facility, and you'll see that this new facility moved a little bit off, well, moved off the footprint of where the current house is to over here. And the thinking behind that was MSA had a sight line down to the Capitol. So this would be following the sight line to the Capitol if there was a new facility to move. So everything else essentially is the same, a little bit difference of the sidewalks and such. Now, the question you might have is cost. This is a very elementary breakdown of those costs, and I'm sorry, I'm just gonna smooth that real quick for people that are in the room. And really, again, what MSA did is they broke it down into phases. It doesn't necessarily always have to go in this order, but for example, phase one would be the parking lot. Phase two would be some pathways and walking ways throughout the park. And again, the draft report actually goes into the great detail about each of those phases. But you'll notice phase 1 through 4 are the same costs because they're the same plans for each of them. What's really different is phase 5, and that's the facility. And again, there's no particular order. If we had a huge donor come in and, you know, the new facility can move to phase 1 or phase 2 or different things like that. So it's not meant that we have to go in this order, but those are the two differences. And then this is a little bit more breakdown if you're wondering kind of what makes up the differences of the facility. So really, you know, what you'll see here is it's the renovation of the house and the improvements to the house compared to building a new facility is the greatest difference. One thing I'll note on this slide is that if it does have a national register, there are tax credits that are potentially able to be used, and that could be up to 40% of the cost of the current facility renovation. These costs on the Frank Ellis House side of things and the tax benefit is not included in any additional or addition, I should say, to the facility. So tax benefits could only be, or tax credits can only be given to renovating the current facility.
And that would be off the bottom line or these?
That would be off of,
The top
yeah, top line,
Okay.
the house improvements and restoration, sorry. Back. Some examples of facilities that have currently been constructed kind of throughout Wisconsin that we thought were pretty similar to what we might be thinking about, especially with a new facility, but also with programmatic. Is one in Appleton, Wisconsin, and one in Lapham Forest, Wisconsin. You can see they're about 5,000 square feet, about 200 applicants. I think the steering committee is around 100 to 150 occupants is what we're looking at, a facility at San Damiano to be able to house, having kitchen capabilities so that it can be rentable and utilized for whether it's weddings or different events that come through. And then of note too is we want restrooms not only obviously for the inside of the facility, but we want to make sure restrooms are available to the attendees and visitors to the outside of the facility. So that would be an important thing. And I know Neil and Jake and others are, you know, in conversations and getting more information from, especially with this Appleton one that just opened up, just to learn a little bit more about those project costs, program planning, et cetera. Now, these next few slides are kind of, we were very direct in our questioning about throughout the public survey process about the facility, what people's thoughts are. And what we really didn't want to do, and I'm going to just move to this next one here, is we didn't want to make an irreversible decision. I think there's general consensus in the committee that more study is needed to be had for what the programming is that we want on the property and what that means for a facility. But also, what does it mean to be a national landmark? What, you know, what restrictions does that mean? What do the tax credits actually stand, you know, are allowable? And so we just wanted to make sure that we had all the appropriate and right data points before making a decision. And I think we all feel very comfortable with where we're at because both are viable. As this says here too on point 3, both paths are really dependent on private donors. As I said, you know, the city, put up for the purchase, and we're hoping to bring that cost down, but everything else above and beyond that is gonna be publicly funded, or privately, I should say, funded in some form or fashion, and so, it's dependent on funding. So, what we do know with a structure is we want it to be four season, we want it to be, have amenities that will increase the park usage. It will provide that opportunity for education and sharing that site's history, but also to be revenue generating to offset the park operation. So we at least know those 4 points, but we feel like we really have to dig into it a lot more before making a decision. Because the last thing we would want to do is just make a hasty decision and then regret it in the future one way or another.
Plus, we need to make sure we can get that historic
Yeah.
landmark status. That is a guarantee.
That's a whole other.
Either,
yeah,
that's a whole other issue.
whole other
Yeah.
thing. These last two slides are really, okay, where are we now and how are we gonna implement this? So, the city side of things is we're coming before parks, and then, later on today, we're going before landmarks. Either the last meeting in February or the first meeting in March, we'll present this to city council for their ultimate, consideration, and then they'll hopefully, make a decision on it the meeting after. And then we'll really push for additional grant funding. There was grants and other donors that were interested in this project, or project could be eligible for, but really we needed a master plan before applying, or we got rejected at one point and they said, you need a master plan before we can consider this. So we will be moving forward with a variety of those things. And then also updating a memorandum of understanding with the Friends. So what is that new role? The current memorandum of understanding with the Friends in the city is expiring at the end of this process. And so what does that look like? And, what we are recommending is that public-private partnership model, and something similar would be thinking kind of that Aldo Leopold model. And so really kind of starting to have those conversations. What does that look at going forward? What is that revenue and what is that expense? Transaction look like, et cetera. And so there's a lot of details that will go on with that. And then certainly on the Friends side, especially if we're looking at that, solidifying our partnership with the city moving forward, what does that mean? Continuing to fundraise for existing cost of operations of the park. So this past year, we covered the full cost and we expect to do that moving forward. One thing that I should have noted during all of this, but we'll highlight now is this, again, it's donor driven, donor dependent. So if somebody came tomorrow, it would probably create some sort of sense of urgency. But this is going to be a process over 5, 10, 15 years. It's not going to be something when it's passed by city council, it will, all of a sudden be enacted and rush forward. The other thing I'll note is this is not architectural plans. These are concept plans. So what the house looks like, what a new facility looks like, where restrooms are, what that design looks like. That's all in kind of the next phase that will, again, have to go before city council. We'll have to go before parks and follow the standard process too. So we haven't skipped all that. Just because this is approved doesn't mean, everything's going to be executed exactly how this looks. And then this next year, and again, I'm probably sharing this with the choir here, is we're really taking on the Friends more of the programming ownership of the property. So certainly still Jake and his staff will help support it, but any programs that happen on the property, any educational opportunities, et cetera, are going to be Friends driven. And so that's with our volunteers and our, our funding, those types of things. So that last point just kind of provides that that note that we're going to really look at providing quality. And I keep looking at Pat here because she's the main linchpin to all of these things happening here.
She's taking some.
Yeah, she's taking good notes. She's like sweating and she keeps a good calm above water, that's for sure. But yeah, so just thinking about all those types of things. So I would say the only final thing that there was consensus around is that the property's probably not going to be called San Damiano moving forward. What that process is and how to rename it, what the name is, that's all another discussion. But the name, will likely not be San Damiano.
And that seemed to be the general consensus of the community.
Yeah.
To whoever donates the most.
Not necessarily, but I mean, certainly there could be conversations, but people brought that up maybe as a little bit of a concern. And I will say, you know, it still has to go through the city process for, you know, acceptance of that. So it's not just if somebody comes with $12 million, we'll do whatever they say. So it still has to go through a vetting process and hearings and feedback and things like that. But it's not out of the realm, I'll say.
You'll get up on the whiteboard again and make all the, remember we
Yeah.
did that with River Ring?
Oh, yeah.
We spent like hours figuring it,
I forgot about that.
crossing
That's
out
right.
names.
What if we had these two words together? Yeah.
Game show.
Yes, yeah, I forgot about that. So that again is just a really quick, hopefully I didn't take too much over my time, but a really quick kind of synopsis of what we did, where we're at, what's being proposed. Open, you know, so the steering committee is gonna meet on Tuesday. And kind of all intents and purposes is we'll be approving this barring any sort of
That's our plan.
drastic changes or feedback that come in between now and then, but I think we've heard very good positive, you know, positive feedback, some tweaks and different things like that that can happen either now or throughout the process.
And you all have a link to the plan?
Yeah.
I have one question.
Mhm.
No bike path through the park.
No. There would be bike access, so we've had bike parking and different things like that, yeah.
Thanks, Andy.
Yep.
That was really good. Did a nice job
Thanks.
Yeah.
boiling down and kind of without, and leaving the weeds
Yeah.
over there. Because there are a fair number of those, but yeah, I would just encourage everyone to look at the plan and I know if you maybe looked at it previously, since then, city administrator drafted a pretty extensive executive summary to that, so.
Yeah.
It's long, but there are a lot of pictures and graphs and stuff, so.
Keeps you engaged.
Yeah. Yeah, questions, comments from the committee?
So Andy, the house, I like the house. I like it because it's a nice sound barrier. When you're sitting on the lakeside with the house on your backside, it's quiet, you don't hear the traffic.
Mhm.
And you were talking about renovations, and so with renovations, would this be in those numbers, are they renovations to completely do the house? Because I don't know if that's necessary. I don't know if it's necessary to have access to the second floor. I'm thinking having a ramp going in so people would have access to going in, renovating a bathroom to
Yeah.
have an accessible bathroom. Are those some numbers that you have looked at or the committee has looked at?
I would say, we haven't looked at it as of recently, what those types of numbers would be. I mean, I kind of hear two things from what you're saying is like, what can we do minimally to get it usable as is almost?
Right.
And I mean, we have some very rough numbers of what that would need to happen. But I would say, what we're trying to do is not put the horse or a cart before the horse of what is that programming that we want on that, and then that would precipitate kind of room sizes, situational thinking. Again, you know, restrooms as being an example. Do you have the same restrooms that are accessible inside and outside, or do you do completely different restrooms for those that are inside than they're outside? So those are all things that we really didn't get into the weeds too much. I mean, one thing that I'll say that we did get into the weeds, because the boiler is dead, is that it's over $100,000 to replace the boiler to heat the house. So like right now, the house is not being heated. And so there needs to be a conversation at some point, and maybe we'll touch on this at the steering committee, of putting more of a timeline on considering the house and renovation of the house and saving the house, of saying 12 to 18 months. And then after that point, let's start thinking about a new facility, thinking about, you know, during that time, trying to get donors, because we're gonna have to decide what do we do with that house, because if we keep that house, we need to start making those investments, but we don't want to make those investments before, you know, we don't want to sink $500,000 into something that then we tear down 3 years later.
Right, yep.
And so I think we're gonna have to have those conversations, and I think my perspective on the fundraising side is, if we recommend, and I don't know who the we is collectively, the city or the Friends or whoever, of saying, all right, our first path is we're gonna try to save the house. We're gonna work for 12 to 18 months with the donors that are interested, with advertising it, with getting some mock-ups so that we can talk about it. And so people really can see what the possibilities are here. And then at that 18-month mark, if nothing happened and people aren't stepping up, we then kind of move in the different direction. I think another number to think about is, and this was just kind of back of the napkin type of numbers. We got an estimate for, if we wanted landmark status, we'd have to renovate or bring back to the 1853 era
1890.
or 1890s, thank you, yeah.
Much
Uh,
more modern.
that front
Not a lot,
facade.
yeah.
So that front facade would have to be put back to that era. That's over $500,000. So that's step one. And that's not, if we did that investment, that's not even guaranteeing we then apply and then get the landmark status. So I think there's a lot of steps and a lot of questions that need to be answered before that. But that's another marker during that 18 months is if we can't raise that $500,000 to do that initial renovation, well, that tells us something about raising the, $8 other million that need to be happening there. So I think, I know that was not necessarily a direct answer to your question, but we're putting these pieces together, but that's also why we need more information. And again, going back to the programming of it, like what do we want in this facility or a new facility? So that we're really comparing apples to apples before we say, let's blow out the back and add a huge addition. Well, maybe we ultimately don't need that.
And one thing I just want to say about these estimates, I think, aren't they based on things that Quinn Evans, which is part of MSA, more of a historic architecture arm of that firm. Those are based on square footage numbers for house renovation similar type houses, projects that they've been involved with. So we just use those multiplied by the number of the square feet. And I think that's where they came up with those estimates.
They included money for an elevator too.
Yes, which we'll
Because
probably almost have to do.
Unless we were gonna just completely seal off the second and third floor and not use them for anything, we have to make them accessible.
Yeah,
So,
and we probably pretty much have to gut the house too. I mean, for the most part, just the wiring, I mean, it's all
Right.
conduit along the floor, I mean, there's just
Asbestos, yeah.
asbestos, yeah, it's so we're not sure what, if we did get historic landmark status, what that would require us to keep in the interior of the house.
Yeah.
It's likely that some of it would have to remain the same, so. Yeah, there's just a lot of questions.
And these are today's numbers, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Right.
and you'll notice in the plan, they tried to plan for some inflation for the phases, if they went from one year to the next year to the next year to the next year. But that's if it started this year. So,
okay, anybody else have questions, comments?
Thanks, Andy.
Thank you, Andy.
thanks for everyone, around the table. Parks wouldn't be what they are without you guys. I mean, this is amazing.
All right. Then I know we have one person who wants to make an appearance, Kathy Carew. We have a couple people online who anyone out in Zoom land want to make an appearance before the committee? Paul or Aaron? Take that as a no. Kathy?
No, I'm just here and interested. I think Paul and I both are about the Maywood Park plans. We're residents of Maywood and want to understand, where that's at and what's being proposed. So
Okay. Thank you.
Thank
you.
I think I'm gonna sit up.
Oh, okay.
That's okay.
Kathy Carew of Rothman's Place.
Yeah, Rothman, 4905 Rothman Place, it's the northeast corner of the park. My parents bought the house in 1953, so it's been in our family for 70 years. And it's right on the park, so I'm interested in mainly this, but I did have two comments about San Damiano. Just the pier, I had an earlier event today that I was still shook up about. There's a squirrel in my sister-in-law's house that we had to get out of the house, and it was kind of scary because he was in a cabinet, so still a little shook up from that. They're in Florida, we're watching their house, so forgive me if I'm a little jumpy. So a few things were answered, but the pier, and I'm just gonna read what I wrote. It's a big process to take in and out such a large pier. This location makes it even trickier because it's so steep and with the stairs. Questioning where it's gonna be stored in the winter. The water's so low now, it's kind of a false sense of where it can be kept. And should we spend manpower hours and safety on this? Maybe something smaller in a different location. I understand it's rocky there and you wouldn't want to take your boat in there anyway. And I know you talked about it making longer, but and it's a little sandier on the north. So just that, some ideas about the pier. Also you addressed the restroom, and the only thing about having that outside restroom is if you have it attached to the house, like the drawing may have shown, that would just like totally change the look of the house, what we're trying to keep. So, and I'm either way, new facility or the house, but just that idea of that outside accessible restroom thought.
Yeah.
So, so the master plan,
I mean,
for Winnequa.
the pet
North,
plans.
yes. So, so what is driving this project and cost of $125,000?
So Kathy, we do have a lot on our agenda, so.
Yes.
Keep in mind.
Yes.
Thank you.
Some of the path designs make sense. People coming in from Greenway and the north entrance at Fireman's head to the pool, library, skate park, and dream park. So the two paths heading that way are meeting our needs. And there are a lot of dog walkers that cut across the park, but I think the dogs prefer the grass over the paved path. You see this path that cuts across the park is also to meet ADA requirements. If someone is in a wheelchair and takes the path to a game and stays on the path to watch the game, they will be behind the goal since the games are set north-south. That isn't a very safe place to watch a game from. And because there are not fixed fields like a stadium or a baseball field, but rather one that temporarily set up, is the requirement the same for ADA? We tried to look at information, but it wasn't clarified. And we don't see that in other parks like at Oberk where they have their youth soccer games. There's the issue of the path being so close to several homes on the east end. They are not liking this at all. However, you did make a slight change by curving it, which did seem to improve that. I want to again address the importance of the green space just outside Fireman's Shelter. We are so excited to hear Maywood will be used for multiple purposes, and one of which is a summer camp program. We loved having them at the shelter, but the location will be amazing for them. And now that they will not be there, it opens up the kitchen for people who want to rent the facility. It's a real plus to the building. It is such a great space, and it is a moneymaker for our city. $250 for the resident, $325 non-resident. That can add up to a lot. The proposed plan, once again, has a path cutting into this green space just outside the shelter. I want to show you a picture of what a setup looks like at a given party. Sorry, it's not very clear, but this is how it's used at some private events. They can set several bouncy houses up because it is so nice and flat there and can be easily supervised by adults because it's right there and it is close enough for electrical hookups. We are thinking that maybe you might say that they can set up on the other side of the walkway, but then you would have cords crossing the path. And for that matter, water hoses are also would be crossing the path when the park needs to be watered. And then we get back to having people walking and biking right into a private garden. So this space needs to be left open, in our opinion. My husband and I discussed other options, went down to the park and agreed that it could be possible, easy and less expensive to have the path end into the parking lot. So something more like this. So we have the path coming around and go straight into the parking lot instead of wrapping in front of the shelter. And this one could come in between these two, something in this order. There's no trees there that would have to be removed, and it leaves the green space alone. I hope you continue to look at other options and think about what you would be taking away of something that is really special in regards to the green space. And I bring up the bouncy houses, but I have tons of pictures how else it's used for all, 4th of July, winter school, and so on. So that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Then, there are no other appearances. I'll declare the appearance section closed. There is no unfinished business. New business 5A is discussion and recommendation of Winnequa Park had path design and shaker shelter remodel. Yeah, Blake, do this, Jake?
Yeah, I'll just introduce Blake quick. So this concept plan was a result of discussions we've had at this committee about connecting the park, making it accessible for people to walk in, especially our senior programs. It was discussed multiple times at committee and council and had unanimous support of this general concept. Blake from Parkitecture, who we've worked with on several projects before. We actually walked it yesterday and kind of looked at all the options. And so we have a few slight tweaks on how we get people in. The main, I think, goal of getting them in off the access drive is for both bikes and pedestrians to be able to not only have a safe route to school, but access it before where we have parked vehicles. And so with this model of coming in off the access drive, we'd have sign and no parking on either side. We do get filled up on Saturday mornings for youth soccer. And that's where we come into a bike parking area, which is significant in size that could handle 50 to 70 bikes. And so that's really a commitment to our sustainability and for people to bike into the park and not drive. And kind of turn it over to Blake to kind of talk about just the flow and what we worked with. And Blake, we have copies of yesterday, the last one that you sent.
Okay, yeah, I'll just share my screen and I'll talk through some of the highlights. Nice to see you all again.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so there was a question about the bisecting path. I'll call it bisecting the midsection path here, and so the U.S. Access Board does dictate that in a large athletic complex, you do need to provide ADA accessible features to every field that is going to be used for public play. And that causes a real problem in these large scale athletic facilities. I mean, you know, Winnequa is big, but I'm talking about these mega complexes that have field after field after field. It can be an extreme challenge to provide access to all these fields, especially when they're in the middle of a bunch of others. There's an example in Middleton, if you've been out to the soccer fields by the Middleton Airport, formerly called Quisling. It's an extremely big facility, really hard to get access to some of the inner fields, but they've actually been challenged. And so they're going through the same exercise of making sure you can contact every single playing area with an accessible route. So it is not something that a lot of communities have done historically, but I will tell you, moving forward, as we see more and more challenges to ADA non-compliant facilities, it's something that needs to be kept in mind. So, but yeah, I'll just kind of run you through here. So we have essentially three main access points to the park. Here, just north of the parking lot and shelter. That loops through and connects up with the southbound path by the skate park. We have the access point by the pool mechanicals, and then we have the access point on Greenway. Maintaining those points, but trying to improve them. Well, actually, we've added this one, but you'll see up at Greenway, we're also showing a sidewalk connection that actually will extend beyond this page to connect up with that existing sidewalk, which is back of curb. That goes further into the neighborhood to the east. So again, trying to touch all the ADA accessible portals into the park. We are going to reconfigure this little corner here a little bit and try and make this more of a loop instead of a strange wishbone geometry that it is now. Jake and I talked about providing an access portal here to the existing pool complex fence. And so we measured it out. That's there's a 12-foot gate there now, which is not readily accessible for access vehicles. So that'll be improved. We are going to kind of meander this pathway a little bit more than it's shown here. This was a first shot at a straightaway, but we're going to try to avoid some of the existing stormwater facilities that are out here and be able to get a better touch point here to the concrete surrounding the concessions and restroom. And we actually were able to delineate the limits of the removal and replacement of that concrete surfacing yesterday. So it was a little chilly in the wind yesterday, but actually a really good day to scope it out in the sunshine. So it was good. As Jake mentioned, we're looking at adding pretty extensive bike parking pad here, and also are showing a concrete access to the flag memorial. So right now that is not an accessible amenity in your park, but we'll fix that by adding that extension. There is a tail here shown to access the open air component of the shelter. That could be shifted over. Let's see if I could draw an option. You know, that could be shifted over to connect on the outside of that shelter so it's not coming in. But I think having some sort of access point here to that open air is important. And, you know, maybe it snakes around and makes that connection. But, you know, I think that a lot of people who park on this half of the lot are going to want to make this move. So we need to accommodate that somehow. A couple other things we're going to try to do. There are, you know, the existing huge cottonwoods along this edge, right? They're all kind of in here. We do want to make sure that we can avoid those as best as possible. So this is going to end up meandering a little bit further out, but I do want to draw attention to this foul line. So that is a point where we're going to have to be really careful we don't get into the field of play. Last thing we want is, you know, someone getting hit by a stray foul. Same would be said on this side. So we'll find the magic alignment, you know, where we can curve out and miss that storm, but not get into that field of play. So those are the highlights. Jake, anything I missed?
Yeah, just to interrupt you quick. So with the orientation with the softball diamonds is removal of the what we call Winnequa 1, which is at the end of Greenway. That goes down to 2 diamonds. The future of the Adult Softball Association has always been in flux based on participation nationwide, statewide has been steadily decreasing over the last decade. We already have the netting on the pool fence, on the pool side. And we dictate the type of bats that the adults can use because we don't want the balls going into the pool. And so there is a possibility that that league shifts to another location in the future. And then that would just be our youth program that's being held there. So part of this reason too, with the pass system, the ADA, is that our programming can be focused on these sites that have accessibility. So our T-ball program, coach pitch, you know, any of the recreational levels that we would be hosting on the 2 fields, we wouldn't be concerned with the location of where the path kind of veers into the field of play. It's just too far out. The north field, we have enough flexibility with the way the infield design is to shift those foul lines slightly and get that path moved a little bit off. But in order to stay out of the cottonwood, that large cottonwood, as much as possible, we do have to kind of swing around it there at the entrance. As Blake was.
Do I dare ask, do we know how old the cottonwoods are? And is safety a concern with those, or I have them in my yard, so I
know, yeah, I
worry
mean,
about it.
they're always gonna be at the whim of large, you know, storm damage, like we can, I think the plan is to have our arborists that we contract with to do some of the maintenance work like we did at Stonebridge to monitor during the project, and then do that same treatment, which is a air spading around the root zone to release compaction
Okay.
and inserting organics, and in an effort to save that tree. Now, as we know,
You thought it
cottonwoods have
Yeah.
lots of options to get struck by lightning and, you know,
Yes.
have major damage to them.
Those are such beautiful trees, so aren't they? You're just.
Yeah, a lot of shade. a lot
They're
of
not in
shade.
your yard.
No,
Yeah.
right, you're not.
Yes, those were the highlights. Any other questions on the connection points or alignments or?
Yeah, Blake, I've got a couple. I guess before the pathways, a question regarding the bike parking. You talked about 70 spaces or so, 50 to 70, where it's marked on the schematic, what about having that amount and then putting some up on top, because people are gonna be coming from two different directions. And so I don't see people bringing their bike all the way down there if they're coming from the Greenwood Road. So maybe having some parking up in that spot.
Yeah, Jake, that's something we could look at, this corner potentially, or maybe even here underneath the Cottonwood. Because I think you're right. If you're coming over here to the Diamond or you're coming to play on this field, you may want to have a closer location. That's a good comment.
And I know this isn't a school thing, but a lot of kids also bike in from the backside and want to leave their bike, like Zeb's tied his bike up to a tree over there instead of coming up the steps. So could be good for school purposes too.
And then Blake, with accessibility of the kind of the line coming next to those fields, can that path be moved a little bit south? And then you drop the line to the parking lot? Because if you have an individual who needs disabled parking, they're gonna be parking in that parking lot in a disabled parking spot. And then if they're in a wheelchair, they would, yes, right there, they could easily then get onto the path if the path came straight.
Yeah, so you're saying do something more like this. Did I interpret that right?
Yeah, and maybe not even so much of a curve, catching the corner of the parking lot so that you're.
It is at the end of the parking lot right now.
That is, okay.
So this would be the end of your parking lot right here.
Yep.
That's the path, the end of the shelter's right here.
Okay,
And so we're already kind of bumped. There's a walk path right here with it. ADA parking is on this side. So the ADA parking is up to the bathrooms, and there's a path that goes directly into the bathrooms. There's not, if I recall, I don't believe there's an ADA stall next to this sidewalk access. So you could end up looping it around the edge of the shelter to connect into that.
so I guess I hadn't looked in, so there is an ADA parking.
Correct.
Kind of
It's
off to the left
it's-
side a little bit.
right where the bathrooms are.
Okay,
The two that are required by code are where the bathrooms are.
Yeah, your ADA is right here. We're in the red.
okay. And my other question then is the smaller fields, the fields 7, you got the 210 by 90. Would that field on the kind of the left, that fit on the bottom right? And yeah,
Right here.
Yes.
We already have another one here.
Oh, you
So this is in the fall, we have tackle football here. Flag football uses these fields. This is a flex field between soccer and flag football. So the path picks up this field and then the accessible viewing areas in the shelter area from here. It's really tight between the edge of the softball diamonds to get these two in. But it works because we can put, we can really pack this end of the park with, 80% of our residents that live within a mile of the park and put soccer and flag football, all in the same area. I just didn't put that temporary field out there, but yeah.
One thing I didn't miss to mention, there was a comment about maybe eliminating this tail of the path earlier. I think if I interpreted that right, and maybe running it in here. I really don't love the idea of pushing bicycle and pedestrian traffic through a parking lot, which is why this point makes a lot of sense. It's actually the high point. There's a drainage basin here and a drainage basin here, so it's nice and high. Got good visibility, and there's no potential for the people backing in and out to get in that conflict.
Yeah, good point. Other comments? Welcome, Tom. What's that?
And the time wrong. I thought it was 4.
Would that park access drive, I don't know if it's even necessary since it's such a short strip, but have sort of like a designated bike lane in it and maybe even a crossover to that crossing path to the main path?
Yeah, good question, Jake. I'll start and then you can finish. We did yesterday talk about striping some no parking through here. It could be long-term that you might want to look at striping that connection, but at a minimum, we'll want to stripe this where the apron is so that, you know, obviously you don't have vehicle prohibition getting into the path.
And that would be our goal from the department, is we reduce the amount of vehicles coming in for the Saturday morning soccer by incentivizing walk, bike, no parking along that path, you know, and having it striped. I think having adequate bike parking there, incentivizing, you know, with the parents, we've got the lower level of the school. Now that you have the path, that's more inviting to use that lower Winnequa parking lot and walking over than trying to, you know, it's not great access, you know, parking lot, especially if it's full, you kind of come in and have to do a big wide turn and work your way out. But there's plenty of areas to park and get to these fields, depending on what field you're scheduled at, without having to park. So, but that I think, yes, that would be the goal. The rest of the week, going to school in the morning and after school, is parking along that path really isn't an issue. It's really just the one day that we have, or evenings, I guess, for the fall as well.
You know, Jake, one thing I was thinking about, we were talking about filling some of this low kind of swampy area, you know, to make the grades a little bit smoother and less soupy. We're also going to want to make sure that we have some sort of connection across here to this parking lot for that exact reason. So that might be another opportunity to site some bike parking, you know, in here, but we'll work through that in the details.
Well, I did want to make note. If anybody's confused by it saying Nichols Road, sort of on the right-hand side, that's, it was corrected in the packet, but that's actually where the pool and the skate park,
Oh.
tennis courts are in that area. Yeah. I just wanted to say, I mean, even setting aside any ADA considerations, to me, a connection between Greenway and the shelter is much, I mean, would be great. I mean, I think now you come up, especially this time of year, or, you know, when it's wet, it's really not, you feel like you can't get there from, you know, from this side to get over to the shelter. So to me, I think it would be a great connection. I don't know that it's gonna get a lot of bike use other than people coming there, like destination. There'll be some cut through. I mean, if myself, I might, you know, use it just now, but yeah, I think that making that connection is a significant part of this.
I would just say from our end too, the goal of expanding the radius on bike and walk to school is huge. And getting kids off Progressive and Rothman in the morning and
Yeah.
after school.
And Winnequa.
And Winnequa, that just is another access to allow them to use the park and the paths that we have, wider paths, and keep increasing that bubble where people feel comfortable in allowing their kids to bike or walk. And this accomplishes that. I think we've got a few modifications to make. We'd like to bring this back for final approval to get it out for bid. This would be a fall project after the, you know, probably after mid-August. To finish this, there's no great time. We'd have some adjustments in you know, our athletic seasons in the fall. But it also gives the opportunity, it's not that big of a project in the grand scheme of things for some of the contractors that have finished up their major summer projects to bid on it. So I think we can take that feedback and kind of have a final, you know, draft version to bring to this committee at our March meeting. Like, does that work on your end?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, anything else on that? All right, so we'll be sitting up again. Item 5E, discussion and recommendation on Maywood Park master plan.
All right, well, we have Blake here in your packet. I kind of laid out, we started a master plan in last year's capital budget with the intent of there being a major stormwater structure being placed in the park. After initial engineering, looked at kind of the topography and the grades and what would be needed, it really wasn't viable to put that storm structure in the park. So we shelved that project. We still have the contract with Blake from Architecture. And as we kind of look at a couple things that came into light since then is just the completion of the Winnequa Road project that had sidewalk all the way leading into Maywood Park with the intent that we would finish an accessible path in the park to get up to Nichols Road, again, to expand that bubble to walk to school zone. With the city contracting with the school district to use Maywood School for the after school and summer camp program, that we would have additional use of Maywood Park along with that program and what those enhancements or improvements or rehabilitation might look at. We've had the mountain bike trail, kind of up and running now for a few years. And we've got some, major tree work to be done in that area, a lot of dead ash. And so there's kind of this, at least from staff's perspective, we talked about it today at a meeting about, what some of the important things could be. And then it's also, even though it's little over 5 acres, it ranks in the top 5 of our parks as far as size. We do have quite a bit of residential properties adjacent to the park, but the impact that it could play for general use as well. And we'd be talking about, at least our recommendation is to go through a master plan process with public input and committee input, but recommending that bathrooms be placed in the park that would be all season, and that we look at our funding sources that we're receiving from the impact fees from some of our recent developments, grant applications, et cetera, and kind of bump this project back up in the priority queue of what we have in the parks system. And so looking for a kind of discussion and direction, if we want to continue with that, we would move with Blake coming up with a couple of plans and moving through the public input process this year.
Okay.
So is stormwater out of the question?
Yes, stormwater is completely out of the question at Maywood. The grades didn't work because there's that main, concrete flume that goes through the park. Well, that is like the least amount. The one that we were concerned about is like underground in the middle of Joyce, Winnequa, and we were trying to get water back to Maywood and treated and then out to the lake. And it didn't work.
Okay.
And so they have different options, which eventually with the Reach 64 and the stormwater, the expansion of the lagoon at Winnequa is probably the next big project after what they do along Midmore. So that's a ways off. I think there's a Midmore McKenna project that's been discussed at Public Works where we have a lot to do some work there. That gets us in kind of the next 5 to 7 years, et cetera. This project we talked about, even with Public Works and, with this master plan, ideally, we can bury that concrete flume and kind of recreate the access, because right now that cuts off the basketball courts and, the mountain bike from the rest of the park. Blake has already done some work. You guys didn't see the concept plans. I don't think. Did we see concept plans? So we had developed a couple initial concept plans with the stormwater. It's just kind of the start for people to say, like it, don't like it, et cetera. And the idea is we can work off that and invite the public and the neighbors, especially, and the parents of the kids that are in the program, kind of come together and see, what would be the best use of the park moving forward.
Okay. So that sounds like a good idea to me. It sounds like you're not talking about anything major in terms of impact on the neighborhood.
No, I mean,
Restrooms and
yeah,
some paths and.
I think from the staff perspective and looking at just the access and connectivity, from Winnicott Road to Nichols Road, there is a 10-foot wide corridor that does connect from Nichols Road that borders the back of some, residential properties. Certainly, we'd want to do some survey work and make sure that the boundaries are defined and look at where that goes, but kind of the existing gravel path is a good indication, I think, of what we'd be looking at and the court sports that are currently there. How we can repurpose those because the asphalt is not in great condition, and then providing some sort of access route from the school to the park, because we're talking, 70 to 100 kids moving back and forth. And so how can we do that efficiently? And also from ADA perspective, if we have both kids or staff that are in a wheelchair, this will be our main point of contact. Certainly we'll be moving to the pool, to Winnequa Park and Frosted's Beach, and but a lot of our time will be on both the school property and the park property, just as New Stormondo use the park.
Just to set expectations up front, Jake, on your ADA connection between the school and the park, that is a cliff to overcome. So,
Well, I've got an idea for that.
I'm sure you always have ideas. I'm just saying it's not an easy feat, that's all.
We got the connection. We've got a connection.
When you talk about the four-season bathroom, like a structure or a porta potty?
So like just a bathroom structure, I think would be ideal. That, the challenge for us, like starting up and shutting down seasonal bathrooms, is there's always like, did we do it right? Did we get all the water out? And then when we look at the amount from an equity lens, the amount of delivery drivers and runners and bikers and walkers using our system all year round, we only have one bathroom facility in Monona that's year round. That's at Below Deck. That's the restrooms at Grand Crossing Park, which are kind of off the path. And from a maintenance perspective, there's certainly less use, in the shoulder seasons where you wouldn't be shutting it down. You still have to, check on them more frequently. But with the kiddos, especially, and the staff, moving them back up to a building when we're out, using the park and the sledding seasons. But I certainly think it's more of community use and a bike depot, because that's such a main, spot. Hindsight's 2020. When we did Schluter in 2016, I, probably should have pushed a little harder to have those bathrooms be year round, but still having one on the bike walk path on Winnequa, I think would be ideal. And, what we bring is some, cost estimates and then source of funding. So I've already been starting to work on our 5-year CIP and adjusting kind of balancing projects and, what really is priority and what can get deferred to later dates to try to accomplish our goals of meeting the demands of this.
One of the things I was going to mention, that with a smaller 4-season restroom building like we're talking about, there are alternate methods to heat that space instead of a traditional furnace or electric wall heaters. We can look at radiant inflow, which is really, really efficient and very hard to vandalize. So in an unsupervised space like this, there are alternate options that I think we'll probably explore.
Yeah. Right. Everybody want to move ahead with it? I mean, it seems like an opportune time with the stormwater decision being made and with the move, over to Maywood. So, yeah. All right.
I have a question. So the walkway, Jake, we talked about previously, like a year ago, is that off the table now?
Well, I think that would be part
Yeah.
of the project, is
Okay.
certainly connecting the sidewalk that's on Winnequa into Maywood Park through the park.
Okay,
I think our discussion, and Mayor, correct me if I'm wrong, was the reason why we didn't propose sidewalks on Maywood Road for kind of connecting that loop from Winnequa.
Yeah, I think that was
The
an
anticipation
option.
was to go through the park instead.
because it seems like there'd be an ADA connection at that end. Is that what you're thinking? On Nichols?
That's one option. I mean, we can go down nickels on a sidewalk and
Right.
get into the sidewalk that way from the building. It's just a little like,
Should be
you know,
entirely
put all
Yeah.
the way, but. Blake is an excellent landscape architect and designer and can kind of give us a couple options that. Could work for both spaces.
Okay. Sound good?
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Blake.
Thanks, Blake.
Okay, item 5C is discussion and recommendation on the capital budget amendment.
Okay.
Sorry,
this-
this is Erin. I know this isn't like public input time. Am I allowed to ask a question?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, for Maywood Park, it looked like they had gone through and tagged a bunch of trees for removal, and we were assuming that was part of the stormwater thing. Do you all know? I think a lot of it was probably old cottonwoods. Is that tree removal stuff moving forward in the interim?
The removals, have the trees been marked? There's
No,
trees
those
been
were,
tagged.
that was part of the survey. All the trees
Oh,
in the
just survey.
park were marked as part of the initial survey. Those
Okay.
weren't anything for removal, but the ash trees in the mountain biking area on the border. We will be marking with like blue paint for ones that we would be looking at removal. But nothing is.
Okay, thank you. And then we'll keep an eye out for public input for the rest. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, we're on to the capital budget amendment. Discussion.
Okay, so part of, I guess, the discussion with this budget amendment, so see is we're proposing. Funding sources is decreasing the Schaefer shelter. In order to cover some of these overages. And that's also the scope change that I'm recommending now that. We proposed this capital budget with Maywood not being a certainty. We thought we would get like the approval, but when we did the capital, we were like, we may not have it. So we want to make sure we do Winnequa and do the upgrades to the shelter to support summer camp programs. Now, as we're moving and looking at what the costs are, we would want to do a lesser version at the Schaefer shelter, get the bathrooms to ADA code. Potentially have gutters, but not do the siding. We would just repair that and paint. And the roof would not get done necessarily because it's not leaking, but we'd be able to reduce the cost of that project that we have allocated. One, depending on what the bids come in as the path project, wait to see what that comes in at, and then two, any of those savings, quote unquote, to use towards roll that money over into a Maywood project. And so that's kind of at least the rational thinking now is that we still want to maintain that building for the next 10 to 15 years for use of the sports programs that we have and make it accessible. But as far as like the siding was a big cost, like a bigger cost that jumped up and some of the other things. So I think we can still make it ADA with the bathrooms. We can keep it functional. We can do some stuff, self-perform some of the things to aesthetically make it look good, but we don't have to put all the money that we had proposed. The other items that we had is in the budget. The sign replacement was from a couple of years ago. As you know, Openwood Studio closed in town. We still have three parks that have kind of the old wood routed signs and one pin at Winnequa. We'd be proposing 3 signs there, one at the corner to replace the message board sign where the flagpole is. And locations we need to discuss, but one somewhere by the shelter, and then we'd like to put one, at least I'm proposing, on the empty lot on a Winnequa roadside to signify that that's park property and access into the backside now that we have the bridge. So 3 there, 2 at 3 Meadows, 1 on the playground side, 1 on the side, and then 1 at Waterman Way. And so we did finally find a company out of Wanakee that can, they're not wood signs, but they can make them look exactly like the ones that we have and be painted. And that quote was a little bit more than what we had budgeted. Because I think we ended up using some of that money for signs at San Damiano a couple of years ago. The other is playground surfacing, that cost increased substantially from the last 2 years when we did it. We can stay within the budget amount, but we don't get as many wood chips. And like you pay for trucking, shipping either way, so like if they come in 120 yards in the back of a semi. And the freight is, $3,000, let's just say per load. So whether it's half full or fully full. And so having that additional funding just it's a better per ton or per square cubic yard. And we always need to be able to fill in the playground. So and some like that is part of when we talk about operating budget, like things that really would probably be in the operating budget, not the capital, but because of the restraints that we have, it's there. And so then for those two anyway, the two funding sources is the truck purchase, which we already have the quotes. We had 65 in the capital budget. It's coming in right at 60. That's been approved by council. It's in production. Should be here by summer. Reducing the shelter by 10,000 for Schaefer Shelter. With the assumption is that we would be looking at a smaller cost project there once we have the bids in for the path.
Okay. Discussion, or would someone like to make a motion?
I would make a motion that we approve, recommend the city council for the budget amendments as presented. Or we could discuss it.
Yeah, is there a second? Second. Further discussion?
Who's the second?
Me, Andrew Patrick. I take this as a unanimous consent, it seems like. No, hearing no more discussion. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We're on to the. So
13 minutes
yeah,
before the next meeting. Today's a triple meeting day in here, us, landmarks and transit, back to back to back.
Transit
So-
got canceled.
Oh, did it?
Yeah, Valentine's
Transit
Day.
did or?
Transit did.
Oh,
we're almost done. You could come in.
come in and listen to. Missy had some family stuff come up. She put together a really nice overall expense revenue report on the department between parks, recreation, outdoor pool. And so I was gonna have her present that. I'll probably just include it in the packet for next time. And so that's one of what we look at constantly is how we're doing both from a revenue perspective and from an expense perspective. And as we move forward with this kind of new venture. And so I think maybe I haven't, did I not? Maybe I didn't email you guys that, yes, the city council, thanks to Mayor O'Connor for her support and others, Doug and Patrick for pushing the narrative and getting unanimous consensus for approving the agreement with the school district. So you didn't see the social media post. We are moving, we are turtling our way back to Maywood. And we did have a tour last night of existing families to walk the halls and look at how the rooms are. And so that'll be fast and furious. Registration is tomorrow. So kind of our slogan this year is hashtag no more waitlist. And not having to like get up at midnight and get all your stuff ready to go is that we will take, as many that want to participate in the program. And so far, the feedback from our parents has been really positive and really excited, about being able to get in. And we certainly have already had a bunch of 4K wrap interest as well. So that's kind of the new program is the offer the 4K wrap program. It's going to be a lot of work for our team and staff over the next, 3 to 4 months to not only hire the staff that we need to hire and look at the supplies that we need to get for this first year. And I've already been working on kind of 2025 budgets. And how that looks with this new program and the staffing, that part of it's fine. It's just the other part with the referendum, we kind of are having dual budgets that we'll be working on.
What's the maximum capacity in the program now?
We'll be able, right now it's 50, we have 53, so we're a little over. And we'll be at, 100, if not more. I anticipate we'll be somewhere in that 90 to 100 this first year, based on interest over the last couple of years. It also will open up the community center for community use for our nonprofits. That'll be another discussion at committee about the building and what to do, as far as what we have proposed renovations that we didn't get any bidders on for last year. But that'll be, coming June 1st. So more than likely starting in June, our meetings will be moved down there because we seem to always come right before landmarks. And we'd like to be able to have a little, buffer time, et cetera.
Okay, could we have our March meeting at Maywood? Talking Maywood Park and then they have a tour of Maywood?
And see if we can do that. I think that would probably be fun.
Yeah.
We have, so the building is shared with the MG Futures program, it's called, the transitional ed program through the special education department. So I think that program goes during the school day, so I'll double check. Should be fine, and that would be great, yeah. Not much, at least from when I remember it in 2008, when I first started, it looks very similar. So it's well taken care of, it's very utilitarian, with the size of the classrooms, but.
Very short toilets.
I've been bringing it since second grade. I'm really excited to. I don't think so.
Couple more weeks of Lake Ridge Bank River Rink, that's been going well. We had kind of tossed around the idea of staying open a little bit later, but we kind of see a correlation in revenue and attendance based on temps this time of year. The warmer the temps get, and there's no snow, we see less participation. So there's kind of like this law of diminishing returns where the end of February seems like it's just a good, end date. And we have plenty to work on between now and then. Part of our capital includes replacement and repair of our picnic tables. One of our sustainability goals is to, we've already invested in recycled plastic furniture with our Adirondack chairs and our picnic tables that we have at Grand Crossing. But we're gonna start to transition some of our main park picnic tables to the recycled plastic tops and bench seating as well. So you'll see that come into the park this year. Just a lot longer longevity. We're just seeing the wood that we get is doesn't seem to last, and get a lot of broken tables, and the process of repairing them can be challenging sometimes, of getting our bolts off of them. Well, that's all I have for this month. I would take any questions, comments, or concerns.
Pickleball. Been playing at Albrecht Park. They got 4 courts set up the same, tennis and then the light striping and such. Is it possible for the courts to open up? And what we're doing at Albrecht, people are bringing their own nets, so it's just portable nets. And so with this type of weather, and next week also is going to be good weather, who knows if we're going to be getting much snow even tomorrow, would it be possible to open them up? And
Right.
people bring their own nets?
Well, we had said all along, you could bring your own nets, stockers, we haven't locked them up, but we were waiting to see if we get any substantial snow. I don't think we will, that we bring a couple of ours back out.
Yeah.
Funny story on that court is that I had not contentious, I had a very strong opinion to the Madison Parks crew about what to do with those courts at Albrecht. And how they strike them, because previously in all their courts, they strike just one pickleball court using the tennis nets. And I had very passionately advocated that they do what we did at ours, and then lo and behold, in the fall, they had restriped them to that and provided the same temporary nets, because their question was, well, what about the portable nets? Are they gonna get stolen? I'm like, we haven't had any issues, and certainly I think having that quadplex at Olbrich is quite nice because of the beer gardens and the lake and access and just, you know, maybe a little relief on our course, would be great. So I was happy to see that. I'm glad that you're, able to utilize, but yes, we will bring those back home.
Good, thank you.
And I forgot, we take the nets off, that was a decision, somebody asked me about this too, multiple times. The nets used to stay all winter long.
We have, yeah, in the past,
It's just to maintain.
the standard practice is to remove nets for winter from all courts, and that's to save on the nets and to save on the, if we're using ice pickers and, you know, damaging the asphalt. But over COVID, we just kind of left them out and then, you know, out for people to stay. They do take wear. I mean, like the ones that we have now, the portable nets, like you can see the wear on them. We're gonna probably have to replace one every year is what I'm, you know, anticipating, just, you know, so they're like $400, not a ton, and because of the revenue producing programs Park and Rec runs through adult and youth pickleball lessons, that's where we can, you know, do that. Replace those with, and we have had some donated from the.
It's not a good time.
As well.
Yeah, I guess one thing I would encourage is having a gate that could be closed, so if we do get snow, you can just lock them up. So that
We thought we had it and we don't. We just checked today, because I knew we had one above the guard office and it was actually like a half gate that we used at the pool. So with the path project, we're gonna be trying, the other things included in this project would be to replace the main pole on both back and front where the gates are that has heaved and kind of made that awkward transition. So just the one pole, keep all the fencing the same, but be able to get the gates that we can close and lock as needed. And then the skate park would get the fencing down to the bottom, because that's always been like a weird thing, and like put temporary stuff, like to have the skateboards be able to hit the fence and not fly underneath. Kind of the ultimate things with that path project.
Yes. Any updates on diversity, equity, and inclusion? Or staff?
We were scheduled to meet with Karen from Nehemiah. This Monday, Missy and I, but she had she was out ill that day, so we have rescheduled this to talk about what we've been doing as a department and then kind of what our goals are moving forward. And I think there's I will email you the draft, or I don't know if it did get approved at council, the DEIB plus report.
Yeah, we haven't seen it yet.
No.
They haven't seen it? Okay. Well, when it is official to
I think it's
council,
supposed to be coming pretty soon.
yeah. There's just a couple things that they have recommendations for that I'll pass.
We don't need any updates on San Luciano, because we covered that. I would just want an announcement Saturday or Sunday. John Traver is gonna be giving this talk at the house.
Yes.
2:30 on Sunday. It's about the history of the park, how it. Would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Oh, yeah.
Is there a second? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? We're adjourned. Thanks, you guys, good job. I was skeptical. Sorry about that, it was Valentine's Day, so.